You're listening to Malam Jumaat Podcast with Rizal.
Yo, what's up, everyone? You're listening to Malam Jumaat Podcast, and this is episode number 5. And on today's episode, it's gonna be a chill episode where I just wanna relax in this month of Ramadan and just to talk about my history in podcasting. So let's not waste any time. We're in a tight schedule right now, so let's go to the what, like 5 years ago, right? 9 minus 5 is 4. No. 9 minus 2. 7 years ago. 7 years ago. Wow. Back in 2012. So that was the first time, like, I was in, this is in 2012. And I was, like, watching videos of this Canadian comedian, wow, named John Lajoie. Very, very funny comedian. Back then, his videos were very. If it's uploaded this year, it will be striked faster than Lawrence Southern's Borderless documentary. Because back then, I think his videos were like, guns don't kill people, show me your genitals. And there's that something of he impersonates like 10 rappers, and then he made a rap with himself. Like 10, he impersonates 10 rappers, and then they just made like a mashup, mix up of the songs. So that was pretty, how do you say, funny. And from there, I noticed like in the recommendations on YouTube, where they said that they have there's an episode called Joe Rogan Experience. And this is back then when the episode was like in 2 digits. I think and then it has John Lajoie as a guest, and he was like, episode, I don't know, is in the 60s or the 70s already. So I saw John Lajoie being interviewed by Joe Rogan in his show. So I clicked it and I listened to it. I think it was like 2.5 hours long. So that was like a challenge for me to listen to that long of an episode of them both, because both of them are comedians. And then they had Brian Redban as the producer of the show. Back then, I didn't know what podcasting is. Seriously, because it doesn't say podcast, it just says Joe Rogan Experience hashtag 72, I guess. I think so. I don't know if it's still in Powerful JRE's channel, but I think you can find it. Hopefully it's in there. So I was like listening to them talk, and I was like, this is very interesting. They're talking about stand-up comedy. They broke down about how they write their bits, their jokes, the punchlines, where are the best places that they did their stand-ups. And I really got into it. And then from there, days later, I opened up, because I clicked that, and then the recommendations started pouring in about JRE. And then I saw an episode with Joe and the late Anthony Bourdain. And I listened to his experience of Anthony Bourdain going to many countries. And he talked about his experience with the food and the culture, mostly in Asia and Europe, and how he handled his life, going to many places and being busy and everything. And it was very, very, how do you say, it pulled me in on this show of this long form conversation when there's no editing at all, start from finish, and then they just talk. There's no censorship. There's nothing. It's like, okay, but then in front at the beginning, it's gonna take like 10 minutes, because as you know, Joe Rogan on that show, he got his sponsorship back then with sex toy company. I think it's Fleshlight. Yes, Fleshlight. where there's like 10 minutes. There's like flashlight, and then also Ting, to where they can pay their phone bills, and audible.com. Yeah, sure. All podcasts will either have audible.com and Ting at that time, back in 2012 and 13. So from there I just like started listening, just like periodically, not every day. If I see there's like a interesting guest, and it went for almost like 2 years, from 2012 and 2014. But before we go to 2014, we go back to 2012, where I was doing my master's in UPM, Master of Environment. I sat down with a friend of mine. He wasn't originally from UPM, but he's doing his master's in UPM. He did his degree in zoology. Is that how you pronounce it? Zoology in and he did his internship in Zoo Negara National Zoo. So he talked about his experiences going from cages to cages, from animals, different animals, and how to handle them. And then he talked about, well, once he got bitten by a python, I guess, yes, and he was bleeding and everything, but then the person that handled the python told him how to make that snake relax and loosen his jaw so it will release his hand. So it was, like I said many times, very interesting episode. And then at the end, when we just finished talking, and then I said to him, you know what if we just like record this conversation that we just had, and then we just upload it on the internet, so that we can share our experiences on certain things. Like, you just talked about your experience, your internship in the National Zoo. And he's like, yeah, wow, you're right. Maybe you should do that one day. Because I didn't, he wasn't interested, but then he was just encouraging me to do that one day with people. And then it didn't happen for 2 years after that. I was still listening to the Joe Rogan Experience up until 2014, when I became a big fan of Joe Rogan. And back then I didn't know him from the UFC, but then I know he's like the commentator for UFC, and I got really, really stoked and into UFC, and also his podcast. He was bringing very, very interesting people, and I just felt like I wanted to become like him. I wanted to start a podcast on my own here in Malaysia, an independent podcast. Okay, right now in 2014, I already know what a podcast is. So I started trying to find ways how to make a podcast, not a video podcast like him, because it's going to take lots of money. And I also, right now, I already have a job. Back in 2014, I got the job in 2013, so it's like 1 year later. So I called my friend Yin Cairo Shahrin to I think it was in Galleria in Precinct 3 in Putrajaya, subway there, and then we just talked. And then I proposed to him that I wanted to start a podcast, and I told him about what the podcast will be, and it will be like a duo. Him and I will talk about anything, and it will be just like the Joe Rogan Experience. I said, with no guests, just the two of us talking about anything, whatever topics that we like to talk about, and then that's it. We'll just upload it. Hopefully people will listen to it and they'll give their thoughts or opinions about it. So after that, he agreed to do the podcast with me, but I have to buy all the equipment, because of course it's my idea, so everything will come from me, and then he'll just help me with the editing and also uploading it on the internet. And I went to Jalan Pasar 2 weeks after that with my brother, and I bought a microphone, a USB microphone. I don't think that it has a brand, but it was a microphone, standing microphone. It was good. It serves its purpose at the early stages of Rambling Monkeys. Oh crap, I said the name. rewind back. Okay. The early days of my podcast days, and I bought it, and then I learned what's the best um, video recording software. So I saw Audacity, so I installed it, and I learned how to use Audacity. And then 3 months later, maybe 3 months later, we went to my house in Gomba because there was no people there. It was quiet. So we just set up. We just set up the microphone on the laptop, and then we just tried it out, the sound check many times, and trying to find out how to get the best sound from the microphone. And then we got it. And then hence we recorded an 8-minute video of us just saying that, hey, hello. So this is our first episode of the podcast, or something like that. It's still up on Podomatic. If you're a Twitter user and you follow me, I think I uploaded the first episode of the podcast up at podomatic.com/. My friend used his name, Cairo Shahrin, because we didn't have a name for the podcast yet. And then after we recorded the first episode of the podcast, we started to try to find a name for it. So we started trying to, what kind of name that we want. So my friend came up with something like, we're just like not talking nonsense and something random. First time something we wanted the word random, but then I was like, nah, not random, something else maybe. And then he said that we're just rambling. And then like, okay, rambling sounds good. So what goes after rambling? And then the reason that I chose an animal, a monkey, so it becomes Rambling Monkeys, because back then I was following a YouTube channel, gaming channel called The Media Cows. So I was really, really interested. I really liked that name, Media, and then Cows. So rambling, and then I don't want it to be like something so generic of maybe like Rambling Dudes or Rambling whatever, Gombak Boys. These are like very bad ideas from us, and especially more from me, because I was like brainstorming the names. And then Rambling Monkeys, and then he's like, nice, yeah, I think we'll go with that name, Rambling Monkeys. So from episode 2 onwards, with him, we started to use the name Rambling Monkeys. And then I had my cousin back then to create a logo for Rambling Monkeys, and he came up with the head of a monkey sideways, wearing a headphone, and with the initials R and M on the headphone. So that looks very nice, and I really, really thanked him for doing it free of charge. And right now I feel really guilty of him not paying him from creating that logo, because it looks very beautiful for a logo. Thanks, Imran, for doing that logo. And episode 2, it went on for 6 episodes. And the first guest that we got was my friend from UPM, a lady named Farhaniza. And the three of us just talked about many things, from jobs to opportunities to love and relationships, all those stuff. And we just like, that one got the most views in Podomatic, because there were like lots of things that we were talking about, and it was very interesting. I really like it. It's very mostly ear catching to people to listen to that episode. And I was like, yes, this is it. But after the 6th episode, my friend Yin got married. I think at the end of 2014 or whatever. I think it is the year 2014. And after that, he was busy with his married life. I really don't want to hound him about, will he continue with Rambling Monkeys, or do we have to do it less than what we have to do right now? and he was busy with his work. He was and his wife and everything. So I felt like I don't want to, pester him about this podcast because it's my idea and he volunteered to do it. He can just walk out anytime he wants. And I already learned how to edit stuff and upload it. So, yeah, but the thing is, procrastination, and also it was a very very busy end of year of 2014, so I had to like stop recording, and then I had to rethink strategy of Rambling Monkeys back then, and I tried to like make it not to do it on Podomatic, because in Podomatic, when you use it on free trial, you can only upload like what, 2 gigs worth of recordings, and then they'll delete the first episode, something like that. So it will delete, it won't store the episodes. So I found out about SoundCloud, and I paid for the pro user, which was very expensive back then because US dollar was very high. I think what, 4.3? No, sorry, it was low back then. But the second year it was very high because it was going to 3.9. 3 ringgit 90 cents per dollar. So I bought it for what, 150 or 170 US dollars per year, and then it will refresh every month of June yearly. That it will refresh. So I paid for the pro user, and then I had to think, how am I going to do this? And I remembered about Joe Rogan Experience podcast, where he invited guests and they would talk about anything. And I did. In December, I had to like do some stuff. I had to buy some other equipment and everything. And there you go. 5th of January 2015, I invited my matriculation friends from matriculasi, Adila and Alia, with me, and then we talked about lots of stuff. Our experience in matriculation, about English, and then about movies and everything. And I was like, okay, this is good. And then second episode was with Raja Arif, and it goes on. And then I've invited Mekronos, Amir Ashraf, Johanna Fendi, Tommy, mostly my friends from Tweet Up Gamers, and lots of time. And then back then it got a traction. People were listening to the podcast, and then I curated Tweet Dewasa first, and then I talked about the podcast and everything, what it's all about, and then I said about podcasting and everything. It gained traction after that, episode 5, 6, and then 10, and then up until 15. I got like people like agreeing to come to record the podcast, even though we've never met in real life. And that was very, very daunting to me, because right now I've never met these people in real life, only on Twitter. And I had to brave myself to go through the DMs and then talk about, hey, you want to go to this to my podcast and talk about blah blah blah, so and so. And then they agreed. So I gave them my address, my phone number, and then they come here, and then we just talked. We've never met. And then we did all these, sound checks and everything. We talked about what do we want to talk about, so we won't actually ramble and go more than 1 hour. But somehow we went overboard sometimes with more than 1 hour, 1 hour 10 minutes, 1 hour 15 minutes. But I really wanted to go like 58. When I reached like episode 15, my friend Yin actually told me that he gave me this, how do you say, an advice that I think you should go way under than 1 hour, like 30 minutes, because not many Malaysians would listen to a podcast because they're not used to it more than 30 minutes. Because you're not Joe Rogan, right? He told me that you're not someone who is that well versed and well thought out and well known in Malaysia. If you're well known and everything, yes, then you can do it because people want to listen to you. But then I was a bit stubborn, and I said, "Hey, people are still listening to this podcast, so why not?" I'm still racking up views, racking up plays and listens and listeners. So long story short, yes, I even got the comedian Rizal Van Gazel, Nadia Khan and his husband Ma Movies, Vien Volpai Ninja, and my best one is Abam Apam, the also comic artist Abam Apam, and his video like got up until 1,000 plays because people saw his face in the thumbnail. When he saw his face, oh, this is Abam Apam. So people were clicking it and they were listening to the podcast and everything. So after that, I just really got all. It was like home run after home run after home run. I was like hitting home runs all night. I got Astral. I got a lot of people that from Twitter who are not say tweet famous, but then they're like well known in the Twitter Jaya sphere. So I brought them in and then we talked about stuff. But then, like I said, I think I should have listened to Yin when regards about the episodes that we're gonna talk, the length of it, and then the plays. It gets it gets the plays, the listeners gets lower and lower, and some people are saying that it's a bit too long to listen because I was talking a bit. I was like going out of tangent and just talking about something else, which is not about the topic that we agreed upon. So it was a bit, messy. It was starting to get messy, and I was starting to get defensive. Where I said, "Who cares, man? It's my podcast." I mean, yeah, I wanted advice, but then when someone gave an advice, I didn't want to take the advice. So it bit me in the ass at the end. Okay, so from the main episode, I tried to branch out a solo episodes called Rambling Rizal. Just like what I'm doing right now, this is considered a Rambling Rizal episode because this is a solo episode. So back then, I had like the main episodes of the hashtag RMP hashtag number and the RR hashtag number, which is a solo episode where I'll talk about anything from myself to the listeners, like I'm doing right now. And then I branched out to two other things actually. Ready, Set, Ramble, which I started with Magat Daniel on movie reviews, and also I became a producer to do a wrestling podcast named Royal Ramble. It lasted about 6 episodes and then it stopped. I guess that they didn't have the chance, they have the time to record the episode, and also the time was very erratic, and I also have to go to their place to record the episode, and it was very hectic. So I think from there on out, I have 4 things to do for the podcast, and it was overwhelming and it was getting a bit intrusive with my personal life. I had no social interaction except with my guests, and I didn't go out that much because we only have 2 days, Saturdays and Sundays, to relax and enjoy before going to work 5 days a week. So if I had to slave one day to do an episode, and then I had to edit it, I have to upload it, so it takes time. It really do. So from that down, I think the downfall of Rambling Monkeys is there are no guests left to invite. There are people that I was interested in, but then they didn't want to become the guest for the podcast. They said that they were shy, they don't know what to talk about, they don't have the time to do the podcast. So I was like running out of guests, and I felt like I didn't want to do like solo episodes week in and week out. I didn't want to because the main pool of listeners to this podcast is the one with the guests, not with me talking about random stuff for 30 minutes and then that's it. So and also the people, and then the more that it goes from episode 40 and after that to 50 something, it was getting hard to get listeners engaging with your podcast. People weren't just interested anymore with guests that they don't know, or they don't know or exist, because I invited my friends and everything with topics that are interested, like Borhan, actually, typical Malay. He's on Twitter right now. He has a lot of things to talk about back then, about his to say about aviation maintenance, about that work that he did, what he learned. He was a student back then, but I don't know, people weren't that interested. And then I think the reason is, when you already invited like popular personalities, and then when you come up the next episode with someone who they don't know, who's an unknown, but with great interesting topics, they just don't want to listen. So from there on out, I was like losing listeners, and everything that I did, I was like very down. I didn't know, I don't know why that happened, and I got really down. I'm not saying I was depressed. I don't want to use that word loosely, but I was very sad. People weren't listening to Rambling Monkeys anymore, and Rambling Rizal was a disaster. It was a failure. One episode didn't hit more than 50 plays. People just don't want to listen to me talk about stuff, about my personal stuff, or talk about current issues and all those stuff back then. And I just didn't know that, is this worth it anymore? This podcast gig is worth it anymore? 2 years, remind you, I did a podcast with Rambling Monkeys, and I invited many people, and I thought that I was like having this good traction of trying to pull listeners, to get people to listen to my podcast. And no, it dwindled after that. And also, I decided like I can't do this anymore. I can't, because I was getting more and more work cut out for me from my my main job, 5 days a week. So I can't juggle that. I was so tired and busy with my work for 5 days, and I just want to relax. I just want to rest during my Saturdays and Sundays, and not think about doing a podcast episode and uploading it and seeing that not many people are listening to it. And I had friends. Yes, they said that you have to switch it up. You have to change your format and everything. Maybe try to do videos instead of audio, because people are more interested in visuals instead of audio here in Malaysia. But remember, I'm already very busy, and you think I have like my Sundays and Saturdays being slaved away trying to record a video and trying to edit it, because I'm no expert on all those stuff. Actually, I know I can record it, I can edit it, and then I can just upload it on SoundCloud. That's it. So probably, I think back in early 2018, end of 2017, I decided to pull the plug on podcasting and on Rambling Monkeys, for the reason that I was tired, I was burnt out, I was chasing something that I couldn't catch, and I was losing listeners. And not many people want to listen to what I have to say, because they're interested in something else. And yeah. And then the mid 2018, July and August, I decided to reboot my podcast, but with a new name, because I felt that if I wanted to start something new, I don't want to start with the past. I want the past to be the past, because I said I wanted to pull the plug on Rambling Monkeys. I want to shut it down and let it shut down. I don't care anymore about Rambling Monkeys. Whatever happened to Rambling Monkeys after that, that's the past. I want to see the future. So I started a new show, which you're listening right now. And this time, I became very careful, because right now I wanted to do it solo. And that's it. Only solo episodes. If I had a guest, that would be something very, very rare. On a rare occasion, I would invite someone maybe once a month or twice uh 2 months, once in 2 months, not twice a month, once in 2 months, once in 3 months, because I want this to be more of me, Zamzul Rizal here as your host, to talk about stuff. As in, I'm trying to make Rambling Rizal a thing again. I don't care about the guests coming and talk about anything, because it's very, very, how do you say, very, very tiring to record an episode with a guest. You have to go on with him. You have to do some background studies of the guest so that you won't sound like an idiot and asking stupid questions at them. And right now, this is just me, and I don't have to prepare anything very, very fancy. Now I just do it in my room. I also bought many new things to upgrade my podcast right now. Right now, I'm using the Blue Yeti Blackout Edition with the swivel arm from Blue. And I have a new headphone, which is the Sennheiser HD6XX for better quality recording, so I can listen to myself clearly. And yeah, you listen, I think, anything after that, you can just listen back to episode number 1, where I talked about who created my logo, who recorded the intro and outro for this podcast. And yeah, I think that's it. That's the history of me and podcasting. Way back in 2012, where I listened to that episode with John LaJoie and Joe Rogan, and it got me hooked on talking about stuff, just talking, and then sharing it to other people. And I get pleasure in that, of course. But then when sometimes pleasure and also your, how do you say, your physical and mental health are declining because of it. And then what you're doing, is it really that worth it when you just put it out there and then people won't listen to you? So it got me really down. And then, of course, it's a passion, it's a pleasure of doing this. But then when you put it out there and people ignore you and people really don't care about your work, kind of like really hits it right in the heart. And I really don't like it. But for now, I just try to have a thicker skin and then just, do it. Just do it. This time, I don't care if I don't have that many views or listeners. As long as I can just talk what I want to talk, upload it, and then that's it. If you like it, thank you. If you don't, doesn't matter. Because right now, I just want to say what I have to say. I don't like bottling up here and I just maybe tweet it or just talk about it in personal. But I like to share things with you. If you're listening to this podcast, I just like to share stuff, and hopefully that it reciprocates. So I talk about something, then you can say something about it. Doesn't matter if you're for or against it. So yeah, everything after that is history. You can just listen to episode number 1. The first 10 minutes I talked about what this podcast is all about. Yeah, I think that's all for the history of podcasts for 33 minutes. And before I end this episode, as usual, you can follow me on Twitter at Lord Rizal, LORDRIZAL, and on Instagram, zrizal1022. You can follow me also on gab.com and minds.com. Also, Lord Rizal, LORDRIZAL. And this is also, if you're listening on YouTube, please, you can just subscribe, like, and then just put a comment down there, just supporting this channel. And if you're listening to this on the iPhone, please also subscribe, give it a 5-star rating, and give it a good review so that it will bump this podcast up so that it will be on someone's recommendation, hopefully. And thank you for listening to this episode of Malam Jumaat Podcast. And let's go to the outro with Miss Amni. Take it away, Amni, to the outro. And goodbye.
Thank you for listening to Malam Jumaat Podcast. Did you enjoy this episode? Give it a like and click the subscribe button to support this channel. Don't forget to click the bell to allow notification so you'll never miss a new episode. See you on the next episode of Malam Jumaat Podcast. Goodbye.